Keir Starmer's first year in Downing Street has produced a striking polling story. Fresh YouGov figures, 16th of July 2025, show his favourability sliding to one of its lowest points yet. In this video, we will unpack the latest data, compare Starmer's trajectory with recent prime ministers, explain why midterm ratings keep sinking, and assess what could reverse the slide or cement it before voters decide. The latest YouGov polling released on July 16, 2025 paints a grim picture for Keir Starmer. Just 1 year after securing a historic Labour victory, his favourability among Britons has fallen to one of its lowest points yet. Only 23% of the public now hold a positive opinion on the Prime Minister, down from 28% just a month ago. 2/3 or 67% have unfavourable views. That leaves Starmer with a net favourability rating of -44, 10 points worse than June, and matching the lowest ratings YouGov have ever recorded for him, on par with July 2021 and May 2025. The graph tells the story starkly. Starmer's support has collapsed since the general election. His fall from grace among the fastest declines ever seen from a UK Prime Minister just 1 year into office. Now, before we write this off as a unique political collapse, it's worth noting that bad midterm poll ratings are becoming something of a new normal for UK leaders. In recent years, Prime Ministers have struggled to stay in positive territory for long. Take Rishi Sunak. At his lowest point in the final pre-election poll of July 2024, he recorded a net favourability of -53%. Liz Truss fared even worse. Just before her resignation in October 2022, her net rating hit a catastrophic -70%. But here's the crucial context. Truss's collapse came after an infamous mini-budget which triggered mortgage rate hikes, sent the pound tumbling, and spooked financial markets. Rishi Sunak, for his part, inherited a Conservative Party worn down by 12 years in power, following David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, and Truss herself. By the time Sunak took office on October 25, 2022, the Tories had been in government for over 12 years and public patience had worn thin. But if we narrow our focus to prime ministers who actually won a general election, rather than inheriting the role mid-term like Sunak or Truss, the picture shifts. Early unpopularity is still common, but Starmer's numbers stand out for their severity. Tony Blair is the notable exception. He maintained strong positive ratings well beyond his first year. David Cameron and Boris Johnson, by contrast, were already in modestly negative territory, around -4 and -2, respectively, roughly a year after their general election victories. But Starmer's -44 as of July 2025 represents the sharpest one-year drop-off among prime ministers in recent memory. Traditionally, newly elected prime ministers enjoy what's known as a political honeymoon. In simple terms, a political honeymoon is a period of goodwill in which the public is willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Tony Blair's first year in 1997 is the textbook example, with soaring approval ratings that stayed positive well beyond the 12 months. Even David Cameron in 2010 and Boris Johnson in 2019, though facing turbulent times, managed to hold relatively steady in the months after their election wins. Keir Starmer's experience has been markedly different. In effect, Starmer's honeymoon was so short and shallow that it was barely visible in the polling record. Rather than enjoying a sustained period of public approval, he faced a steady erosion of support almost from the moment he took office. When Starmer entered Downing Street in July 2024, his net favourability sat at about -9. That was hardly a honeymoon, but it wasn't a disaster either. Around 40% of Britons viewed him favourably compared to 49% unfavourably. But Starmer's support was broad rather than deep. He lacked the passionate grassroots base that Jeremy Corbyn enjoyed on the Labour left, an activist-driven movement that, despite polarising the electorate, delivered a sense of loyalty and purpose. In the United States, Donald Trump benefits from a similar dynamic through the MAGA movement, a fiercely devoted bloc of supporters who turn out consistently, defend him vigorously, and provide a stable foundation for his political influence, regardless of controversies. Starmer, by contrast, entered Downing Street without his own MAGA base, no mobilised army of true believers ready to weather political storms alongside him. Despite being a polarising figure on the national stage, Jeremy Corbyn did have a notably passionate grassroots base. His core supporters were large, organised and intensely committed. The numbers tell the story. Corbyn's Labour in 2017 won 12.88 million votes, a 40% share of the electorate. Starmer's Labour, despite securing a huge parliamentary majority in 2024, garnered just 9.71 million votes, a 33.7% share. More seats, yes, but fewer voters, without a deeply committed base to anchor him. Starmer's support is broader but shallower, leaving him more vulnerable to rapid swings in the public opinion. This lack of deep-rooted enthusiasm is also evident in Labour's youth membership figures. According to Labour List, in a piece published on the 5th of February 2025, citing National Executive Committee members, Labour's youth membership is around 30,000 down from more than 100,000 5 years ago. The same report says overall membership is about 309,000, down 11.4% since July 2024, and the party has been losing roughly one member every 10 minutes in recent months. According to Hattie Simpson in the New Statesman, tensions have particularly flared over his stance on Gaza. Starmer's decision to conditionally recognise a Palestinian state contingent on Israel agreeing to a ceasefire sparked discontent among young Labour activists and university groups. The result has been a widening gap between party leadership and its younger members. This is where poll numbers can be misleading if read too narrowly. A Prime Minister doesn't just need broad appeal, they also need committed supporters who will turn out to defend them when the tide turns. Without that activist base, Starmer risks being politically isolated if his broader support continued to erode. Now here's the twist. Starmer does have one thing on his side: time. Under the current law, the next UK general election doesn't have to be held until mid-August 2029. That's 4 full years away. History offers examples of prime ministers and governments who saw poor midterm ratings only to recover in time for the next election. Take John Major. In the early 1990s, his government's popularity plummeted after Black Wednesday in 1992. Yet he went on to win the general election that same year, narrowly but decisively. David Cameron also faced difficult approval numbers mid-term, yet secured a surprise majority in 2015. But time is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it allows a leader to rebuild their image, deliver policy successes, and shift public focus. On the other hand, it gives opponents years to define them negatively. Prolonged unpopularity can become baked in, meaning voters' impressions harden over time. And the longer a leader's ratings stay low, the more those perceptions risk becoming permanent. Political scientists often note that voters form lasting impressions of leaders within the first 18 to 24 months. That means Starmer is entering a critical period. If he spends too much of it underwater in the polls, recovery becomes much harder. No matter how much time remains on the electoral clock, recoveries from deep unpopularity require more than just waiting. Major policy wins, economic upturn, or decisive leadership in crisis can shift the mood. Starmer's government would need to deliver tangible improvements to living standards, address voters' concerns directly, and project a clear, consistent vision However, projecting a clear, consistent vision is something Starmer has struggled with. Starmer has often struggled to explain what exactly his government wants to do with its time in power. Even among his supporters, there's confusion about Labour's direction, and he has even struggled to clearly justify or communicate his government's choices to the wider public. That's not just media spin. Starmer himself admitted this. In an interview with Sky News' Beth Rigby on the G7 on the 17th of June 2025, when asked about his biggest mistake so far, Starmer responded, "We haven't always told our story as well as we should."
Okay, PM, I'm out of time, but you're about to be Prime Minister for 1 year, so very quickly, one-word answers. Can you tell viewers the one thing you're most proud of and your biggest mistake?
In terms of mistakes, look, I think that we haven't always told our story as well as we should, explained our decisions in the way that might, in retrospect, have been better, but that's the nature of politics.
For a Prime Minister less than a year into the job, that's a blunt acknowledgement that messaging isn't cutting through. That admission matters. Weak storytelling is costly in a year this volatile. One challenge is that the political landscape in 2025 is volatile. Economic uncertainty, global instability, and domestic divisions mean even a competent government can be buffeted by events beyond its controls. And in the age of social media, narratives about leadership failures spread faster and stick harder than ever before. Of course, poll ratings don't exist in a vacuum. The strength or weakness of the opposition matters. If the Conservatives remain divided, or if smaller parties fail to capture the public's imagination, Starmer's low ratings might not translate into immediate electoral danger. But if an opposition figure emerges who can unite critics and offer a credible alternative, Labour's massive 2024 majority could start to look less secure. In politics, perception often becomes reality. For Keir Starmer, the battle now is to change the story the numbers are telling before it's too late. If you found this data useful, comment and subscribe for more news on politics.